Francisco with our new lovely backdrop. I'm just smiling because I was talking to Mario um, about counting down so that he's not included in the in the start of the show, and it reminded me like because I was talking to what's that 10 years ago. I was in Washington doing media appearances, and I was on RT television, Russia Today, and sitting in the studio, and I was saying, "Hey, so how big is your network?" And they're like, "Oh, we're all over the place. We're like trying to challenge CNN." And I used to travel a lot overseas, and everywhere you go, every international hotel back then, I know it's probably still true, is CNN International. And in fact, in some places, it was the only TV station in English that you'd find. So I remember, in fact, one time I was in Taiwan, and that's the only thing that was on. It was raining, the weather was terrible, I couldn't go outside, and so I'm stuck in the hotel room, and all that was on was CNN International, and the reporting was terrible. I mean, it was really bad. Anyway, so here I am in the TV studio in Washington, in Russia Today, and the guy goes, "Yeah, we're trying to challenge them. We're in hotels all over the world. In fact, we have 10 million people will be watching this as soon as you go live." "Oh yeah, that's right. That'll start in 5." So anyway, no need to be nervous. Just 10 million people watching it. Anyway, welcome. Good to see you all today. What a wild day yesterday was. It was craziness, and it was a really kind of a rough day. I mean, it was amazing to see all of those people there in Washington. I know there were some other rallies in state capitals. I know here in California, we had a good size rally, but obviously the action was in Washington D.C. I haven't seen the numbers yet, but gosh, there had to be at least 500,000 people there, right? Tons of people, and it was a beautiful thing to see. It was a typical, Trump event. A couple of Trump events I've been to were really fun. They were funny. There was positive energy. Everyone having a great time. A lot of laughs. Of course, peaceful, and that seemed to be going in that direction. But people were furious, and that led to some of them going over to the Capitol. I don't think everybody who went to the Capitol was a Trump supporter. I do think that there were some agents provocateurs in there, but clearly the lion's share of the people who were in there in the building were Trump people and Trump supporters, and they got caught up in the moment and got in. I think there were a couple of dozen, maybe 50 of them that got out of control, and out of 500,000, I suppose it's not terrible, but the symbolism of it was really, really bad, and just can't be condoned. And all summer long, I was out there. Just look at my Twitter timeline and my feed there. You'll see I was constantly calling out politicians for not condemning the violence and the rioting. I mean, clearly condemning the violence and the rioting that was happening, like I said, in Minneapolis, and it's Seattle, and in Portland, but you can't condemn one and not condemn the other. Listen, the property rights apply when you defend property rights when the right is attacking it and the left is attacking it, or you don't defend them at all. You have no concept of what the defense of property rights really is. So in any event, it was really a tough thing to see yesterday, and the killing of that woman was really, really hard. I mean, I don't know if that will be considered a justified shooting. That's going to be an interesting trial. I think it's interesting that the name of the policeman who fired on her, that name hasn't been released, whereas in the other shootings, the name of the police officer who shot the person, the victim, was published, all over the place within like 24 hours. So it's interesting that we haven't seen that person's name yet, but maybe we will today. But as I predicted yesterday, the day before yesterday when I was live, I didn't really expect much to happen. We did a whole segment on the rallies, I didn't expect much to happen in terms of the outcome of the election. I find it I find it interesting that uh, well, I mean, there's a lot of things I find interesting about this. First of all, the fact that we know that the prospects for electoral shenanigans are infinitely higher when you have mass mail-in ballots. Um, Led, and everyone talked about it. The president talked about it. His team talked about it, and yet it didn't seem like anyone was terribly prepared for the shenanigans. I don't know. Maybe they did, but I don't know if there were any preemptive measures taken by by the Trump team to prevent those things from happening. If they did happen, if the preemptive measures were taken, they certainly weren't publicized, and they certainly didn't amount to much. So either it was neglect or incompetence, frankly, that let a lot of this happen. And then afterwards, with all the talk of the releasing of the Krakens and the all the other anomalies and testimony, it's amazing that the lawyers couldn't find a place where they had standing. I mean, as I mentioned the other day, the standing issue is really interesting to me. I mean, how is it that lawyers don't know where they have standing? So we've been dealing with a lot of theater, and yesterday was, I guess, supposed to be some sort of last straw measurement. But as people like Thomas Massie, congressman from Kentucky, Rand Paul, said, this electoral issue is really a state's problem and a state matter. When it gets to Washington, D.C., they really can't reject it. They don't have the authority to reject the outcome of the elections as prescribed by the states. So unless we change that, I suppose, in the Constitution or in the law, that's just the way it is. So the rally yesterday was great to see. I mean, it was lovely to see up until the time that people started storming the Capitol. But as a tool to affect the outcome of the election, it was obviously not going to go anywhere. Anybody who thought differently, silly. I mean, they ought to rethink themselves if they thought that was going somewhere. And also for the people who were there, who was storming the Capitol building, I wonder what they were thinking. I mean, I guess mobs generally don't think, but what was that your plan? I see now that some people are out there saying, I saw one guy say that he liked the fact that people stormed the Capitol. Okay. Okay. On what level? I mean, if you think storming the Capitol is great and people roaming the halls is a good thing, I suppose. But I mean, if you're a serious person, if things are going to get to that stage, that was a terrible dry run. There was no plan. There was no, there was nothing there. That was supposed to do what? What was that supposed to do? It was unbelievably poorly thought out, and really didn't, only really led to condemnation and loss of support from people who support the president and support the objectives. So I don't know. Don't think it was a very, very good thing on the one hand. I suppose the only thing that could be put out there is, and this I got to really tread delicately because I want to make sure that people understand. Before I continue, before people start giving me a hard time in messages, I was on TV 4 times yesterday, condemning the siege on the Capitol building, on Twitter all day yesterday. I'm going to get to my TV interviews in a minute, but let me just say this. I lived in Europe for some time, and I spent a lot of time in France. In fact, I lived there effectively for kind of 2 years. When all said and done, I've been to Paris 50 times. I lived in Marseille, and one thing I don't pretend to know a ton about French politics, a little bit, but not a lot. And I'm not a fluent French speaker or reader, more of a muddler. But one thing I did take away from French politics, let me give you an example. I remember being there, and they haven't done it recently, but back in the 90s, French truckers would just drive out to highways and then park their cars in these long convoys and just stop them in the middle of the highways and block the highways. and like main arteries that people just couldn't get through. And they would do stuff like that. I mean, I'd come back and the frickin' baggage handlers would be on strike when I flew into Charles de Gaulle, and I'd have to schlep my bags. I mean, the taxis would go on strike. I mean, they'd go on strike. The trains would stop, and then the people would have these massive, demonstrations and that sort of thing. And I always thought to myself, why is it that that the French government puts up with this stuff? Because, all right, mass gatherings and that kind of thing, one thing, but blocking traffic or blocking thoroughfares, could put people's lives in jeopardy. What if someone has a medical emergency and needs to get through to the hospital on that highway, and all these freaking truckers are blocking the road? And then what about what about when rioters start, when demonstrations turn into riots and they start damaging property? And so it's like, why is it that they put up with this? And then there's someone sort of explained to me that the French Revolution is sort of like it's a very it's 200 plus, happened 200 plus years ago, but in another sense, it's very much part of the body politic in France. People, particularly the politicians, they are. It's almost as if it happened yesterday in some ways. I mean, they think about it, a lot, and they think about how out of control it got, and I think that puts them on edge. I suppose. I mean, one thing that could be said about that some people might use as a defense of what happened yesterday is that it puts politicians on notice that the people can get to them, get in the Capitol. But again, if that's your plan, just to send a scare to the politicians, what did you just do? You went in, you scared them, and now they're going to get armed to the teeth so that no one can get in, can get into those buildings. I mean, I'm not encouraging that. I don't want to say that, but I'm just saying I'm just wiping out every argument. Yesterday was a loss across the board. Going into the Capitol building was just a terrible mistake. Mostly, because in the end, a lot of this of the fight in politics is a battle of morality. It kind of goes back to Sun Tzu in The Art of War, right? And whoever loses the moral high ground ends up losing the war, and that's one of the reasons why it's not just that violence doesn't really solve anything in the end. It's just unbelievably impractical. It just doesn't resolve anything, and so we've got to fight the fight on other levels. There are fundamental investments that need to be made in the future of America. I mean, I see this battle with kids every day. If your kids are engaged in social media, going to schools, their little brains are already programmed, and they're locked and loaded moving forward to have a very liberal / progressive view of the world. And the left side of the aisle, if you want to just use that two-dimensional political spectrum, they have played the long chess game. They've got all the pieces in play, and we're now kind of scrambling just to protect our king. And if we really want to play the game, we need to start over and start repositioning and going after the really sort of long-term fundamental areas where the left has a stranglehold over the schools, via the teachers' unions. We have to go after entertainment and media, and really, again, but it starts with the schools. I think that's really the key thing. And at the same time, keep the fight alive in the meantime, the tactical fight alive, so that we can keep our liberties, which is really what makes this country, has made this country so unique. I have to tell you, I am very concerned about moving forward. Joe Biden will be inaugurated in 13 days, and then they're going to effectively control Washington, D.C., and I'm concerned. I mean, the one thing I think that will keep them in check is the legacy of Trump. The Every time Joe Biden does something that doesn't come across as America first, people are going to scream their heads off. And what's going to be the defense to that? What's going to be the defense to not having an America first agenda? So, so I think that's really kind of the only check that remains in place. But but they're pretty clever, and they'll figure out ways of doing things that will chip away at our liberties. They'll use bribes to get us more conditioned to accepting government interference in our lives, and so I'm really concerned. So possibly in terms of the tactical battle, the next thing that comes up is the battle for the House in 2022. And history, is on the side of the Republicans in that fight, and that it's very frequently the case that first-term presidents lose the House when they have it. They lose the House in the midterm elections. We're going to make sure that history, we keep that history on our side, and we make that happen, because I think that's really our only means to basically keeping the country going along. We have so many massive problems. I don't want to be Johnny Downer here, but we're facing some enormous issues. I mean, I was concerned about the debt when we were, at $7 trillion like 1,000 years ago. Now we're at like $27 trillion, and that is not even including all the other debt that people have, the private debt, the corporate debt, the cities, the states. I mean, we're in a weakened position. But in any event, let's life goes on, right? We just move on. And some people had their say yesterday, and they decided to go the direction that they went in. That was their call over in Washington, D.C. In the meantime, county chairmen like me will continue to move forward in terms of progressing the ideas of government that work and make things better for everybody. In any event, let me swing over to this. So yesterday, I had 4 on-camera interviews regarding what happened, and not to mention a Zoom County Central Committee meeting, which I had to prepare for. But I did the interviews, and I thought there was something interesting here. In fact, where is that? Is that it? No. Oh, yeah, there it is. Oh, what is that? Oh, I see what I did. I should have done that, right, Mario? I should just go over to the thing. Can people see this?
Let me check.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. So yesterday, you can see, like, that's just one. Can you put that back up? I'm not going to play the interview, but you can see, it's actually my house. That's what that looks like, huh? Anyway, so I did, 4 of these and talked about, this was really, really bad what people were doing. No different, but, in terms of the damage done and the amount of the threat, but fundamentally, principally, no different than the people who rioted and took away, people's property and damaged people's property in the riots this summer. So that's what I said in all those interviews. The last one, if I get a chance, if they put it up, if I find it, I'll post it on my Twitter feed. The last one got contentious because they were trying to blame Donald Trump, and it's not Donald Trump's fault. I mean, people think that Donald Trump is the leader, like mass hypnotizing people, and I'm not saying that Donald Trump doesn't have persuasion skills. He clearly does. I mean, he is a studied, persuasion technique user. There's no question about that. Just see Scott Adams for that. Very adept at it. All sorts of little things like talking in visuals. He does lots of clever things that people don't get or don't give him credit for. But he wasn't responsible for what happened yesterday. In fact, he's not even really responsible in some ways for his own success in politics in terms of winning the presidency. He really was just riding a wave, right? He didn't make the wave. He rode the wave. He saw the wave coming when nobody else saw it, and jumped on top of it and rode it well, like a champion surfer. But and when others didn't see it, he saw the wave and he rode it well. But he wasn't responsible for it, and that became a contentious interview on local TV last night. Like I said, if I find it, I'll put it up. But the other interesting thing was, and you'll see this now in terms of the media, they're trying to put this twist, this interesting twist. It's really clever stuff. And I just want to say, I did interviews with two local network affiliates yesterday. Actually, so I did two separate interviews with NBC, one with the ABC affiliate here. So it's three. And then I did one with an independent outfit, KRON. And all of them had the same sort of take on it, on this one particular issue. And that is how they said that when BLM protests, not, by the way, not Antifa, but BLM, when BLM protests, they were treated much more harshly than the Trump supporters who went into the Capitol yesterday. I just thought that was, by the way, like talking about persuasion techniques and polemical technique and strategy. I got to tell you, it's like it's admirable evil. It's probably that's a phrase I think I'm going to coin. It's sort of like, I kind of admire how evil that was, because that was really good stuff. What they did was they, first of all, I don't even recall BLM going up to the Capitol. I don't remember that happening. So now you're on the defense, like, oh, well, first of all, were all the people, all the Trump supporters, they're basically creating a black and white thing. Were all the Trump supporters white people, and BLM, all the BLM supporters were black people? So that's number one. Number two, I don't even recall that happening. Number two, but number three, and I think really kind of the biggest issue is, I think that what they were trying to do is divert people's attention from the obvious, which is that all summer long the media needs the opportunity to condemn the violence and the property invasion of the Capitol on the one hand, but they're stuck because they can't, because they didn't say a frickin' word. They didn't condemn any of it when it was going on in Minneapolis or Portland or Seattle or Washington or Oakland or any of the other cities where it happened this past summer. They didn't do a thing. So what they're doing is they're trying to reestablish their legitimacy by saying that that the people who even though they tacitly support, if not openly frequently, the people who they tacitly support were abominable this summer. They did terrible things, and it's all asking me to compare how MAGA people were treated to BLM people in terms of their approach to the Capitol building was kind of masterful trickery, polemical trickery. Really, really interesting stuff. I thought that was kind of thing. And like I said, it happened across networks, which means it was kind of coordinated. Somebody was creating that feed. Now, listen, maybe there was I think sometimes what happens is these networks watch each other and they go, oh, that's good, let's grab that. And then it just sort of seems like it's coordinated, but it isn't. But then other times you'll notice they have things where the scripts are like identical, and that spooks me. That makes me really concerned. And when I get those kinds of questions across networks, like I did yesterday, about the distinction between the way BLM was treated and MAGA when they approached the Capitol building, that makes me concerned. So anyway, so there's that. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is, and I just, for those of you who are on Twitter, I've been working on my Twitter account, and I've sure that I've been shadow banned, specifically shadow banned on particular tweets, shadow banned on a bunch of other things. I had a fan account that was turned over to me, and that one just got shut down over a month ago, and they won't open it up. They said there was suspicious login activity. It's called John Dennis SF. So then I was trying to log in, kept going back, changed my password, told them I don't know what it was, but the password was changed, and it's connected to one of my email accounts, and they just haven't gotten back to me, but they allowed me in like sort of limited access, and I noticed that the account had 27,000 followers, and now it's down to 0. So when I get full access, am I going to get my followers back too or not? I don't know. But in any event, I'm at the point where, listen, it's their platform. If they, they can create the rules that they want to create, and I'll find other, things to do with my time. It's obviously remarkably unfair, but that's life. Life's not terribly fair, and it's not a, it's interesting, and it's allowed me to whine just a little bit about it. I'm not going to go into it not much more than that, but I just find it interesting, and I also see that a bunch of other conservative / libertarian voices are out there saying the same thing, that they're getting their followers cut. So anyway, hey, listen, I want to do something. I've got reminders up here to do plugs. So please, follow me on Twitter. It's Real John Dennis on Twitter. Instagram is also Real John Dennis. Facebook is, what is it? Is it John Dennis for Congress page, Mario?
Yes, please.
Yeah, John Dennis for Congress. Thanks. And then on YouTube, it's John Dennis Report. Trying to get these consistent at some point, but that's what we have right now, and I think we're moving towards the John Dennis Report. So, in any event, thanks for joining us today. Let me just see. Are there any comments here? I should see. There's some people on Facebook. Sorry. Oh yeah. Can we? Yeah. I'm playing ballot for it. Yeah, I'm not playing ballot for it. But it's not my job also to come up with the specific examples of it. I know, and get them in front of judges and juries to get them adjudicated. And in that regard, the president's team didn't do very well. Now, it's also partially a problem. It seems like the system isn't terribly clear. I mean, if high-level lawyers can't find ways to get standing regarding election fraud, I don't know, then we need to redo the system, because it's not just the lawyers who ought to understand that. It's the people who need to have confidence in the system, need to be able to understand it as well, and that's the average Joe. And so, there's nothing that's happening. Legal pedophile. Okay, well, I'm not so sure about it. I don't think pedophilia is ever going to be legal, but if it is, then you're going to see a total nightmare. Congress says trillions. Well, hey, listen, bud, we're on the same page there, Mr. Hamilton. But I'm just going to say that was if that was a big plan to send some message to them, it wasn't terribly well executed yesterday. So there's that, and then let me swing over here for a second on Periscope, which I can't see. Anyway, well, listen, I got to run anyway, so we'll leave it at that. I would love to go through your comments, but I'll have to do that another time. Got a full day ahead, so enjoy your time, and I will see you next week, unless something interesting comes up, and we're compelled to come back online. Okay, that's it.